Hey folks, the ability to disable your enemy's ship is a really powerful tool in securing quick, safe kills. There are three ways you can do this in the game: distortion weapons, an area of effect EMP, or explosive damage that destroys a ship's internal components. Since EMPs are limited to 4 specific ships in the verse, we'll focus primarily on distortion and explosive damage weapons since they're more versatile. These weapons aren't without their drawbacks though. They do less damage than their pure damage counterparts, and distortion damage in particular doesn't do any damage at all to the hull of a ship. So you need to mix in other damage types unless you plan on trying to run every single enemy into an asteroid or another inanimate object. We can do better than that though, so let's get into it. So first let's talk about how to plan the distortion weapon loadout. Distortion weapons are energy weapons, so they share ammo pools with laser weapons, and their magazine size and recharge rate are affected by capacitor settings. In most cases, you'll want to have about 1/3 of your damage or less be distortion damage, because otherwise you'll lower your DPS too much for actually destroying the hull of the enemy ship. If you were in a one-on-one situation, that wouldn't be an issue because you'd be disabling them, but for NPC bounty hunting missions, you're going to be fighting against 3 or 4 enemies at a time. So if you take too long to finish off a disabled enemy, you're giving all the wingmen time to tear you apart. For this reason, I don't recommend distortion on ships with only 2 weapons. Here we're looking at some combat footage where I'm in a Reliant core using a fully gimbaled energy weapon loadout with 2 size 1 distortion repeaters. I've still got 4 size 2 laser repeaters, so I haven't sacrificed much of my damage for this, and as you'll see against the Hurricane, we're still able to shut them down pretty fast. There is one thing to be aware of for size 1 distortion repeaters though, and that is the yellow bar underneath the ammo count, which is the heat buildup. Size 1 distortion weapons will always have heat dissipation issues since the cooling provided to a size 1 weapon is just not high enough. Upgrading the coolers won't help either. Since the Reliants have 6 weapons, the total ammo pool is lower for each weapon, so the distortion repeaters do get to cool pretty frequently while the ammo recharges. In realistic combat situations where you're not firing 100% of the time, this is sufficient. And you can apply the same logic to other ships like the Drake Buccaneer and the Anvil Hornet since they can also use the same gimbaled 6-weapon loadout. However, for ships with fewer weapon hardpoints like the Arrow or an Aurora, you'd be much more heat limited for the size 1 distortion repeater, so I'd recommend staying away from using them, or fit a size 2 distortion repeater when the ship can fit it. The benefits of these loadouts is that you'll often shut down the most dangerous enemies. Hurricanes and Hammerheads are frequently disabled by distortion damage because they have so much hull HP that the distortion damage overtakes them before the ship sustains fatal damage. This can actually speed up the kills against these targets by making the Hurricanes easier to target and by making the Hammerheads much safer to finish off, since you know that partway through the fight they'll shut down. For example, in this video I'm in my Freelancer Miss and my shields have gotten low. But instead of trying to recharge them, I stay on the offensive since I know that pretty soon I'll be safe and before long the Hammerhead stops firing back. Valkyries and Wardens, on the other hand, only get shut down sometimes because they'll often be destroyed before the distortion damage can overtake them. And that's actually by design for our mixed distortion loadouts because we don't need to disable an enemy if we can quickly kill them instead, and so we balance the mix of laser and distortion weapons for that purpose. I've actually taken down Hammerheads using most of the typical VHRT light and medium fighters using this method, but I don't recommend it because it takes a long time to get through the hull with the lower DPS ships, and the Hammerhead is still quite dangerous while you're trying to work down its shield. It doesn't end up being the most efficient use of time, even with the lucrative group ERT payouts, since in the 5 minutes it takes you to clear the Hammerhead encounter, you could have done 2 VHRT encounters and made up the payout difference. And yes, I know I could have used cannons to speed up the fight a bit, but then I'd be sacrificing my performance in all the fights that have Hurricanes, and those are much more frequent and dangerous. Now let's take a look at distortion cannons. They're available from size 1 through 3 as the Sucker Punch series of cannons and as the Vanguard specific EVSD cannons. I typically only fit cannons to my ship when the ship has a size 5 hardpoint that can take advantage of the huge DPS increase that comes with size 5 cannons. Otherwise, I prefer to use repeaters since I can more easily kill Hurricanes with repeaters, so I don't prefer the Sucker Punch series, but you can use them if you like small cannon fits. Since the Vanguards can fit a size 5 cannon, I like to use 2 EVSD cannons alongside the MVSA laser cannons. to add some disabling power to my fit. You can see here that the Hurricane starts floating aimlessly almost immediately after its shield went down, right after the EVSD cannons start hitting its hull. And after that, it was only a few seconds of concentrated firepower from the big size 5 cannon for an 18-second kill. This next clip will show how effective the Sentinel with EVSD cannons is at taking out a hammerhead without even using the EMP. Our goal is to try to focus our firepower on a single shield face as much as possible, and as soon as we start hitting the hull, we see multiple shield faces go down simultaneously as the distortion damage shuts down the shields, and then the weapons shut down right after. Since we cleared all the wingmen first, at this point it's a free kill, so all you need to do is avoid flying into anything that can kill you and keep up the damage to take it out. If you do stop shooting for a while, the hammerhead can recover, so just be aware of that. Also, if you're in atmosphere, you're a little bit less maneuverable, so you might take some more damage from the hammerhead turrets, but your shields should be able to tank the damage long enough to shut the hammerhead down, so prioritize the offense and you're gonna get the kill. Constellation series of ships have 2 size 5 hardpoints on the top and 2 size 4 hardpoints on the bottom. The size 5 hardpoints alone do a ton of DPS and are more than enough to take out anything in VHRT or ERT bounties, which means we can swap the size 4s to something for more utility. Since there are no size 4 distortion cannons or repeaters in the game, I've got the distortion scatterguns fitted. Normally, I don't prefer to use scatterguns because their low range makes them challenging to use effectively, but against a hammerhead, we're usually circling pretty close, and it's a giant target that can catch most of the scattergun pellets. As you saw, I've already cleared out all the other wingmen since we don't need any additional incoming DPS for the hammerhead fight. Because we've got 2 size 5 cannons and 2 distortion scatterguns, we can be relatively confident that as soon as we're in range, we'll disable them, so we're going to focus on full offense. Since the scatterguns have 400 meter range, we're going to fly almost directly towards the hammerhead, only strafing to the side at the last moment to unload our full firepower on it as we pass it. As expected, the hammerhead shuts down and we still have 20% of our front shields left, so we just keep laying into it and secure the kill. This was effective, but we can do better. The C-788 Combine is a size 4 ballistic autocannon with the ability to disable its targets by destroying their internal components. We can see here that a single volley from the C-788s sent this Hurricane into an uncontrolled spin so that it can be easily killed. Its DPS isn't particularly high, but its primary function is its destructive utility, and it fulfills that job really effectively with 100 rounds of ammo worth 2 minutes of continuous firing time. Another benefit of the C-788s is that since they're ballistic, they allow us to direct our full weapon capacitor to our primary damage dealers, giving the size 5 laser cannons 37 shots each. This is a positive feedback loop. Since the C-788s give more ammo to the laser cannons, we can rely on the Omni-Sky laser cannons more and therefore conserve our ballistic ammo once the targets have been disabled. And that's exactly what we're going to do against the hammerheads. While the ship is fighting back, we're going to give it everything we've got, but once the hammerhead goes silent, we'll only use our laser cannons to finish it off. We started this fight with 16 out of 25 on the front shields, and still have been able to silence the hammerhead well before we were in any danger. That's another advantage of the C-788s over the scatterguns. The extra range lets you get a bit more time on target and more flexibility in your engagements, which is especially useful against Hurricanes. I wanted to show one more clip to demonstrate the capability of this ballistic cannon. Armed with only 2 size 3 laser cannons and a C-788, this Avenger Titan is able to take on the hammerhead, and eventually it'll be able to nullify its defenses and complete an ERT. I'll jump ahead to the juicy parts, like this one here where we can see the shields of the hammerhead suddenly all go to half and then go fully down because we just destroyed its shield generators. You can also see the EM signature of the hammerhead on the target display has drastically dropped, confirming that the shields are down. Skipping ahead again, we see that the guns stop firing and the EM signatures continue to drop, and the IR, or the heat signature, is drastically rising. We've most likely destroyed the coolers, which caused the ship to overheat and shut down. At this point, the ship can't function, so we can take our time finishing it off with just the laser cannons. I'll skip forward one more time so we can see the hammerhead came to a rest on the moon's surface where we finish it off. Now, I don't recommend this because it's going to take a really long time for a relatively low DPS ship like an Avenger to finish off a Hammerhead. If you're doing this to make money as fast as possible, you'd be better off fighting against the VHRTs and killing them faster. But this just proves what the C-788 makes possible for pretty much any ship with a size 4 hardpoint. An EMP is a ship weapon that can only be fitted to a few ship hulls. The way it works is that you press the EMP trigger once to start charging it, and the closer to full charge it gets, the greater the amount of damage and range of the EMP pulse. You fire the EMP by pressing the trigger again, and it releases a sphere of distortion damage centered on your ship. The thing is, if you want to guarantee that you're going to disable the enemy, you need to take out their shields first so that the distortion damage from the pulse hits the enemy's components. And even then, since it's just a single pulse, it'll knock the enemy out, but they'll be back in a few seconds. For most targets, that's enough time to finish them off, but against ships like Hammerheads, it's a good idea to keep an alternate source of distortion as well to keep them disabled while you work your way through their high hull HP. Well, that's all for my thoughts on utility weapons. They can really help in killing the more challenging targets with a trade-off of a slightly slower kill time against the easier ones. I think it's a trade-off worth making, so I'm going to include a bunch of fits that I recommend for various bounty hunting ships in the description of this video. If you have any other requests or questions, let me know. Thanks for watching, folks. I hope you've liked this video. Cheers.